Elderly by now, they're still being called hidden children, born to loving Jewish families which perished. Some of them survived. Hi, my name is Michael Alter. Over 25 years ago, coming back from work, grabbing a beer and flipping through the channels, I saw elderly Jewish lady being interviewed. She was crying. She gave up her baby before the war. She survived, but she never got her baby back. She said the only thing that she would like to see before she dies, she would like to see, as she said, mein Kind. Less than 1% of the 1.5 million Jewish children that were murdered by the Nazis survived. What happened to those surviving children? Where are they? A story like that I'd like to share with you.
My family comes from Holland. My family tree goes back well over 300 years.
I was born Anita Helfgott in Lvov.
My mother was at Auschwitz and she died pretty much right away in 1943.
My name is Eva Lang. My name as a girl was Eva Chava Tuchschneider.
My mother gave me away to a family that she knew.
My father was a representative of textile machinery for Poland.
It was in 1939. I was a very small boy, 5 years old.
I was born in Antwerp.
Thousands of children without the right to live, quote unquote, were given up by their parents to whomever, just to survive, just to live.
I was in the ghetto for a year. My mother was taken away, and my father gave me to a Polish person, a stranger. And they took me and they saved my life.
And I survived the Holocaust by being in hiding off the face of the earth. Nobody knew where I was, where I existed, not even my parents, not my brother, not my sister.
What happened is we were left with neighbors, and those neighbors were given money to look after my brother and myself. But in those days, the people were rather, they took care of themselves and their children while we were left starving. And so my uncle one night came and got us and took us to Belgium. In Brussels, we stayed with my uncle's girlfriend. My father lived through the war until 1945, and the Germans were moving people around, so he got moved to Mauthausen, Ebensee, which is away from Auschwitz. And then when the war ended, when the gates were opened, all the inmates, the people escaped, tried to run out, and that's when the Germans shot many of the Jewish people when they were leaving the camp. My mother was at Auschwitz and she died pretty much right away in 1943. The Red Cross records told us that.
My mother gave me away to a family that she knew, hoping that I would be saved, not knowing who would be saved, whether she would be saved or whatever would happen to me. And it must have been especially difficult because I was only a couple of months old. So who gives a baby up who's only a couple of months old? And that happened to my parents, who were very young people, because when they were murdered, they were 34 and 35 years old, with all the hopes and dreams that all of us have. So a whole lifetime of dreams and hopes were taken away immediately, were cut off.
What I remember is I don't have any recall of my life with my mother. I was told many years later that I had a mother and father, brother and sister. My father was a diamond cutter, and I went to see the plant where he worked, and I was told Now, of course, there's no guarantee. I'm telling you exactly because nobody knows. I've never been able to trace my father, but he was a diamond cutter, and I believe I was told that the SS came, took all the people away that were Jews, and also took their files. That was one of the reasons I couldn't find any files on him. So, and they shot them on the spot. They didn't even take them to Auschwitz. My mother, she could see 1940, everybody knows what was going on. It was getting worse. My brother and sister was in school, and they took the children away from her 6 months before her. And I find it very hard to talk about. Because as I got older, I realized I'm a mother and a grandmother, and I can imagine your kids disappearing. So then now she has me. I'm a baby of 2. And she got hold of the underground, and she gave me to a non-Jewish man. And then what he did, he took me home to his house. I believe the next day they took my mother. She was taken. They closed the house, and she went to Auschwitz.
My parents were people that lived from Poland in Warsaw. They were Hasidic. I come from a Hasidic family, and they moved to Belgium. There I was born with a few of my sisters. When the war began, we flew to France. My parents were sure that France they will never conquer, but they conquered very quickly. It was a story of Dunkirk and the débandade, with the army and everything. And we went to a little village south of Toulouse. Then after, the gendarmerie of France took us without knowing to a certain place. It was a camp, Agde. And after Agde, to a worse camp, Rivesaltes. There were hunger, dirt, wind, cold, everything what you want. And there, an organization named OSE came, and they wanted to help some Jewish children to take out from this camp, from this Rivesaltes camp, south of France. And some people came, and I was chosen with one of my sisters to go with them. We had no choice, we want a better life. So my parents decided to give us to them.
One day when my father came out of shul with my brother and I, a man positioned himself in front of him and said, "Excuse me, may I ask you a question?" You were careful, but the man looked okay, and my father said, "Go ahead." And this was in the fall of 1941. And he said, "Go ahead." And the man said, "Are you Jewish?" And my father said, "Yes." He said, "I thought so. I've seen you come by on Saturday morning with your sons, and I know a bit about Jews, so I figured that out. But the other question I have for you is really, what are you going to do to avoid being resettled in the East?" Resettled in the East was the phrase that was used by the authorities and by the Jews themselves as to the displacement, the expulsion, if you will, of the Jews. And my father said, "I don't know. My Jewish friends don't know. And my non-Jewish friends stand on the side. They want to see how this thing shakes out." And this man said a most incredible thing. He said, "May I help you?" And that's how we got into hiding.
To shelter Jews in Nazi-occupied Europe was extremely dangerous.
Three quarter of the French people were collaborators with the Germans, but there were still very big, great people. That's why I'm still alive, because I was saved by them. And those people, you can count them on your fingers, but they deserve the best of the best. Those are the people that make France, the big France, the honorable France. That's those people, because of those people.
Local populations were not in a hurry to save Jewish lives. The ones helping had to fear not only the Germans, but also their own neighbors.
One boy which was living in our house, 14 years old, he showed to the Germans and Slovak fascist, here is a Jew partisan. So they took me and I was in jail in concentration camp in Slovakia, Sereď, and from there I was in Terezin.
I remember one thing, and that had been hammered in my head by my father, who said, when liberation comes, you stay indoors. Because a stray bullet can undo what we have been trying to preserve. So that is one thing. The other thing is that the liberation was utterly anticlimactic. At least where I was. There was no euphoria, there were no Canadian troops coming in. We were surrendered. And eventually the Germans left and the Allies, or the Canadians in this case, came in.
She opens the door and these two come in and they look at Gabriel and said, "This is not your son." And she says, "What do you mean he's not my son? What are you talking about?" So she said, "Let's check him." They took him to the kitchen and saw that he was circumcised. So he said, "He's a Jewish boy, he's not you." And she said, "Look, my husband was Jewish and I threw him out, I didn't want him, but this is a Christian child. What kind of Christians are you?" You know, she started to shout at them. At that time, this little boy, Gabriel, went to the bedroom, opened the door and says, "Mommy, I'm going to bed, I'm sleepy." He opened the door, he got to the bed, he kneeled down, you know, and started loudly praying. Of course, he had to know all the prayers, praying.
Quite often, Jewish babies had to be baptized in order to be helped.
Christianity was my religion because that's I used to like this, be at the table, Lord bless our meal, amen. And I used to go to church. I loved church because church was, the acoustics. I remember the hymns. It was beautiful because it was these old in Russia and in all kind of places in Europe. You got all these beautiful churches, and I suppose that in my youth, in me as a Jew, there was a little bit of the Christian as well. Not a Christian by birth, but because I had warmth there. I was I didn't feel there was anything wrong with it.
There was a priest who would give papers of dead children, you know, same age, etc. So they got this priest over and he said, "Yeah, I'm going to give her false papers, but only if she's baptized." So my mother said, "Do whatever you want to her, give me the false papers, you know." I wasn't worth living if I wasn't baptized, I guess.
Friday night came, they lit the Shabbos candles and they had the table set for Shabbos. And I don't know what, but I kneeled down and blessed myself. I just kneeled. Oh my God, you think I'd... So he picks me up and they all look a little bit annoyed with me. I don't know what I've done. Remember, I don't know that such a... So now he's trying to explain to me something. He's going like this with his finger. I know I've done something wrong, but for the hell of me, I didn't know what.
I probably would not have been Jewish. You know, but who knows? You know, it's hard to say what if. But I'm here, and I'm Jewish, and my children are Jewish, and they married Jewish, and my grandchildren are Jewish. One of them is married Jewish to a Jew, so we'll see about the others. I hope so.
The war did not pose abstract questions. The war gave concrete answers.
The general attitude was, as was expressed to my father, when he reported after the war to the local registry, "Oh, you're still around, eh?" That was the tenor of welcome.
When I asked once the directrice, Madame Agnoer Goéland, as we call her, and I asked her, would you do it if you were asked before the war? She said, oh, I'm not so sure. But here we were in the middle of the war, we were infected, and people used to bring me in the home that I was keeping, children. Should I tell them to go away? No, I took them.
My parents, to get the idea to give up their children, and I don't wish this on any parent, but they were asked to divest themselves of their 3 children, because the 3 children would go into hiding separately, to spread the risk, of course, but also to let your children go without any hope of ever seeing them again.
Fear and loneliness were constant companions of those children.
I was raised in a sad environment. There was always an aura of sadness in the house.
It became known after the war, and it was so horrendous that we really didn't want to face it. My mother was upset when I got a book somewhere about concentration camps. That was not good for me. That was too horrendous a reality for a kid of 15 years to face. So there was a certain self-protection going on as well. And the people who came back from camps, a cousin of mine came back, and she had dinner with us every Friday night. And we were under the parole not to ask any questions.
I knew that if I was to be hidden, not to be prominent, if we went to a class or something, and I knew the answers, never to put my finger up, to be behind the others, to make myself lower.
There's things in my life to this day. I have fears. I feel insecure, and when I was younger I didn't understand these emotions, which I do now because I've done so much research on the Holocaust. Remember in my day I didn't even know such a word as Holocaust or hidden children, and I didn't have anybody like myself. I didn't know another soul, so I never shared with anyone how I felt, my fears, my longing, my loneliness. I always have a smile.
Even after the war, they discovered anti-Jewish hostility.
We were once by the river with my sister, and they took me, big guys, I was 10 years old, they took me and they threw me to the river. It was a relatively strong river, and I was not swimmer, and I survived somehow.
Many Jews who survived did not take back their name because of anti-Semitism. They kept their hidden name, their false names. But I said, no, the great big hero, at 15 or whatever. I said, no, I'm going back to so I was back, Bianca Rosenman. And I said, my cousin, Gabrish, he has to have his name too. And it was Gabriel Rosenzweig. So they were making fun of him. So I went to the school without asking anybody. I went to that school and I talked to, I don't know, a teacher or principal or whoever. I said, I'm going to take this child out of the school because I said he went through horrors in the war. He lost both his parents. His father fought for Poland and was killed in Katyn because he was an officer. And this child is not going to suffer any more anti-Semitism here.
After liberation, the identity question started to come up.
This is interesting. This is our roots, and maybe I should become a law-abiding Jew, a good Jew. But then I also realized I was struggling with identity, my own identity, try to find ways to make some meaningful significance of my life. And then I looked at Judaism and I said, this is really not for me, because if I really want to be an obedient Jew, I must abide by all the laws of Judaism.
When we had the second conference of child survivors of the Holocaust, it was called Hidden Children. And there was one young woman in my group who said she was terribly upset because nobody wanted to believe her that she was Jewish. The authorities didn't want to believe it. She was a woman, of course, so she couldn't prove it sexually that she was Jewish. And she finally went to a tattoo artist and had a big bloody Mogen David tattooed on her shoulder. She says, if anybody questions me now, I just tell them.
The Jewish children's wounds never healed.
That was around May 2nd. I received a paper so long. It was my name, space and time, where I have to go. For what? I didn't know. But when I read it in Belgium years ago after, I was already 34 or so, or 5, that they were already in Theresienstadt, they were at the gas chambers, and also, of course, crematoria. So I understood that was my paper to be finished. And the next night I didn't sleep. Almost the whole night I was after so many years. But I realized that time, few hours practically before liberation, I will be liquidated, murdered.
My hiding name was Theo. They considered Leo too Jewish. Years later you wake up and you find out that there have been 13 popes called Leo. Much too Jewish, But it is indicative of the depersonalization that even a child goes through. You can't even have your own name anymore. Not your last name, not your first name.
There was an entresol, you know what that is, entresol? At the back. And my brother was taking those little children, putting them there and hiding them behind the sweaters. And of course, they have to be taught, these little children, not to make any noise, not to cry, not to sneeze, not to move. And somebody here afterwards asked me, no, that's impossible. And I said, yes, it is impossible. If you threaten them with killing them, they will do that.
No wonder that all of them have a very special relationship and special feelings towards Israel.
There has to be a place where they are unconditionally accepted. And that's the state of Israel.
We are used to anti-Semitism, and I do believe the danger of us Jews is don't feel too comfortable in the country that gives you freedom where you live.
My sentiment towards Israel is unshakable. I would die for Israel.
If there ever was a necessity for the Jewish people, and the Jews are a people, no matter where they live, if there ever was a necessity, it is Israel. Because for one reason or other, the world can't leave the Jews alone.
We, like you have an conditional love for your wife, so should you have an unconditional love for Israel. Absolutely, no questions to be asked.
If Israel wouldn't be here, I don't think we could live the life we do now. I don't think it would be good for us anywhere. And if Israel would be here, maybe there wouldn't be a Holocaust.
Any Jew who thinks they don't need Israel can forget it. They'll regret it for the. You have to support Israel. You have to be for Israel. That's You know, that's our chance. That's what keeps people afraid, because you know, the Israeli, phew, we have to help our soldiers. We have to be there for them. I believe that. Do you?
Thank God this is in the past and the future is bright. It should never be forgotten that thousands of Jewish children were saved with identities disguised and often physically concealed from the outside world. Those youngsters faced constant fear, dilemmas, and danger. Theirs was a life in shadows, where a careless remark, a denunciation, or the murmuring of inquisitive neighbors could lead to discovery and death. While working at this documentary, it became evident to me that a certain number of Jewish children survived the carnage because they were saved by Gentiles, righteous Gentiles. To them, to their descendants, the Jewish people are eternally grateful.